Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna, as Fanny said, talk about the biology of the beetle and what CFIA has been doing for surveys. Some of this may be repeat for you or a nice refresh. So where did it come from? As the name suggests, it is native to the main islands of Japan. It was introduced in the early 1900s to North America, and then in the late 1930s, it came to Canada. And ever since then, what was then Agriculture Canada and what is now Canadian Food Inspection has been surveying for this pest. It is a quarantine pest to Canada. It's regulated under the Plant Protection Act. And what that means is that we have import requirements that say any plants for planting coming into Canada need to be free of this pest, and that any plant material moving from, say, Ontario, where this beetle is established, also need to be free of the pest and need an inspection. So moving away from the history and the background, what does it look like? So the adults are about 1 centimeter long and 6 millimeters wide. A few key features to recognize it, if you were to see it, are the metallic green color and the bronze wing covers. The larvae are very nondescript. They are a C-shaped white grub. They look very similar to European chafer. They're about 2 to 3 centimeters long when they're fully grown. Another key feature are 6 tufts of white hair along each edge of the beetle. So hopefully you can see that there. And then here's a photo of all the life stages. You've got your egg, your 3 larval phases, the pupa, and the adult. So here, there's lots of life cycle depictions out there, and here's one for you. Notice that at the bottom of this photo is technically underground. So for most of the year, you're going to find a life stage or two underground at all times, which is why soil is so risky. So basically, they have 1 generation per year. The adults are going to emerge in June. We're starting to put traps out now. And they really are dependent on temperature and sunlight. So when the temperature is about 21 degrees Celsius, they're going to start flying and being very active. They're going to mate and feed. And over her lifetime, the female beetle is going to lay upwards of 60 eggs. And she'll dig down into the soil to do that, and maybe about 2 to 5 centimeters down. The eggs will hatch in about a couple weeks, and then the larvae begin to feed on the grass roots. And they'll do this all summer and into the fall. And then in the winter, they'll kind of dig down even further from about, 5 to 31 centimeters is what the research says. And then they'll hibernate there. And then when spring comes, they'll begin feeding again. So just remember that when it comes to Jason's turn to talk. He's going to talk about the topsoil being risky, and this is why. Once those larvae have fed enough and they're fully grown, they pupate and the cycle begins again. And so the top portion of that picture shows the adult. There's a spindly little tree there that has some damage. So during the flight period, you're going to find that the regulations for green waste are coming into effect. And then just a couple slides on lookalikes. Although 10-line June beetle, if you know your insects, really isn't that close. We've found that we're so grateful the public calls in and landscapers, and really most beetles and some of the true bugs are fair game for people to call in about. So you've got your 10-line June beetle, and of course the European brown chafer, and then Japanese beetle on the right. And the scale isn't perfect, but Japanese beetle is the smallest, right? It's only 1 centimeter long. And then here's a comparison of the European chafer grub on the left and the Japanese beetle grub on the right. It is a little smaller, the Japanese beetle grub, and you actually need a hand lens or a microscope to identify them. And because European chafer is so common out here that we don't focus on identifying larvae, and we don't encourage reports of larvae. We won't turn them away, but we really want to focus on the adults and surveying for those. So here's the bad news, and this is why we're all here today, is it attacks over 300 species of plants. It is extremely polyphagous. Anything from ornamentals to nursery stock to field crops. There's some commonly listed species on the slide. Everyone's favorite, the rose, very iconic flower. And then there's Persicaria, which came as a bit of a surprise in 2017. There's a picture of it at the bottom left. It was planted in the beds at David Lamb Park, where it's pretty much ground zero for this beetle. And so this beetle loved this plant. All right, so just a few pictures of the damage it does. And so as you listen and look, it would be great for you to form a search image. It's doubtful that you're going to see feeding damage, but if you were to start seeing, an insect that looked like this or feeding damage, we welcome people to give us a call. So feeding is most extensive on clear summer days. So those hot days, 21 to 35 degrees Celsius, there's relative humidity above 60%. That's when you're going to see them out and about. That's when they're going to do all their feeding. Cloudy and windy days, not so much, and no feeding on rainy days. So it's a double whammy, right? You've got the European chafer that just feeds below ground, but as you've seen now, the Japanese beetle feeds above and below ground. So the larvae feed on a wide variety of plant roots, but of course they prefer turf. And so there's a picture there of turf that has been damaged. And you can see the yellow-brown color coming through as the larvae kill the plant, kill the turf. And then on the right, it'll be spongy and easy to pull up. And you may even see larvae. Now, this is in places where it's well established that you'll see this kind of thing. Our infestation in Vancouver, even in 2017, we weren't readily seeing this, but it's good to know. So just ending on a few more slides of damage in terms of the biology of this beetle. So skeletonizers. The word skeletonizer is referring to the leaf. When the beetle feeds, it feeds on the tissue between the veins, and it leaves the veins behind and leaves a lacy looking leaf. So that's something to keep your eye out for. Here's another couple photos of the damage. The label there says Chinese chestnut on the left, and you've got buckeye on the right. And I guess the bronzing is from the leaves dying and turning brown. And then here's Japanese beetles on a rose, feasting on a flower bud, and they will feast on the fruits as well. So here is the Persicaria in David Lamb Park. Here's a kind of zoomed out shot for you. If you've been in David Lamb Park, just to the right of this photo, there's the washrooms. And here's a close-up view of the leaf with some of the feeding damage. These plants were in full sunlight for most of the day and had the most obvious damage. So that concludes some of the biology and symptoms. And now I'm going to quickly talk about a few regulatory aspects of this beetle. As I said, it is regulated under the Plant Protection Act. It's also regulated in the United States. This map that you're looking at is a map of North America, and the dark green color is a category 3, it's called. What that means is it's infested. The light green is partially infested. The orange is pest-free, and the white is not known to be infested. And so these are regulatory phrases and jargon, as are the categories. And this matters if you're moving plants across borders and between provinces. Within both of our countries here in North America, we both have regulations requiring people to get inspections before you move these plants from infested to non-infested. And because of all the work that Fanny mentioned that has been done, including the work done by you to comply, we remain pest-free. We retain our status, and the infestation is under active official control. So here's a shot from iNaturalist. This is an app that's gaining a lot of popularity out there if you haven't used it or seen it. And so the red just being reports, people reporting where they've seen Japanese beetle. And of course, the eastern part of North America is where it's centered. But you do see those little dots over on the far west for the BC detection. And the Pacific Northwest states always do get detections every year, whether they arrive through airports or infested nursery stock. The Pacific Northwest is constantly battling Japanese beetle. So we're moving away from the regulatory aspect into some of the impacts. So why do we care? Why are we all doing this? This slide has 3 photos, and these are Japanese beetle traps that we don't necessarily use here. They're used in the States. And these are plastic bags with the yellow funnel. The beetle is attracted to yellow. And the key takeaway is that the bag is clear. It's just got a few beetles at about 11:30 a.m. But 3.5 hours later, you've got thousands and thousands of beetles in that bag. And I know it doesn't look like much, but if you poured it out, you would probably, if you like insects, you would think it's pretty cool, or you would be horrified. And so these traps don't catch everything out there. The traps, while an awesome tool, really don't catch everything. So you can imagine the environment where these traps are set up is getting a lot of damage and pressure. So really, we're here to prevent that damage to our agriculture and horticulture sectors, and that pest-free status. We really want to keep that. So this slide has a lot of text and numbers. The takeaway from this is that the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, I think it's called now, we haven't updated our slide, kindly did this economic analysis and came to the approximate conclusion that we're looking at about a $28 million annual crop damage if the beetle was to become established here in BC. This cost is not including the cost to treat, the cost to manage. So that's the big takeaway from this slide. So entering into the final part of my presentation today, we've gone over the biology and the regulations and the impact. Now, what have we found? And so if you've been with us since 2017, this will be a repeat, but I'm going to recap what we've found. So the map you're looking at has False Creek in the middle and Stanley Park up at the top left to orient yourself. The shaded part is the infested or regulated area. And then you've got all these dots. And so if you can see the blue, those are negative. There's yellow, which have anywhere from, I think it's 1, I can't remember actually. Oh, here we go. 1 to 25 beetles in the yellow. Orange is 26 to 49, excuse me. And red is 50 plus beetles. A handy trick is to press the control button and the wheel on your mouse if you want to zoom in. So this was 2017, about 1,000 beetles and 42 traps, all centered around False Creek, except for one lonely beetle out at UBC. So this is a different map, but of the same year. This is British Columbia, and you've got Vancouver Island. And then the little inset at the bottom right of the map, at the far right, you've got False Creek. And at the far left of the inset is one lonely red dot at UBC. The good news is despite several years of intensive trapping, we haven't found any more. So it's entirely possible it was a hitchhiker. So what happened next year, the following year? Keep in mind, this year was, everybody scrambled. Everybody was talking to everybody about what are we going to do about this? We wanted to get some situational awareness about what was out there. And then in 2018, everyone came together and treatments were laid down. But treatments target the future generation. So the 2018 treatment would not affect the larvae that were sleeping and then waking up in spring and feeding again. All of those larvae emerged as adults, and we saw a huge increase from 1,000 beetles to 8,200 approximately. And so that was 2018. We had some outliers outside of the regulated area in Stanley Park up at your top. And so the regulated area was expanded. In 2019, we did see a huge decrease. This was a very good year that gave us hope that we were on the right track. About 1,200 beetles, or an 86% reduction, all centered around False Creek still. There were 4 beetles outside the regulated area this year. None of the beetles outside the regulated area, despite intensive trapping, have yielded additional beetles, thankfully. And here we are at last year, the most recent results. And so what you're looking at again is a map of False Creek, the downtown east side. Stanley Park is underneath this little label that says 214 beetles. There are no detections in Stanley Park last year, which is great. We are down from 1,200 beetles to just over 200. And there you go. Here is one more map for you. At the very far right is a tiny red square, and that is in Port Coquitlam, about 20 kilometers away. It was a female beetle caught last year. It was in a condominium complex, and we did set traps around it immediately within the same season, as well as at a nearby nursery, and they were all negative. But of course, we're going to trap again there this year, targeting things like nurseries and rail yards. Another really interesting thing that happened in 2020 is that we unfortunately had a lot of traps being stolen and tampered with in the downtown east side. So we had to innovate. And I don't know who it was, but somebody said, well, why don't we hang them in trees? Why don't we put them up high where people can't reach them? And so the table that you're looking at has 4 columns. The first column is the trap type. You've got ground traps, just your average normal trap, and then those put in trees on the next row. The number of JB found in the trap is the second column, and you can see ground traps only caught about 50, canopies caught over 160. And then you've got the number of traps that were positive in the third column and the percentage that all of this represents. So we did do a lot of discussion about this, and the idea and belief is that sunlight exposure matters greatly. We already knew that, but this just really shows it. A lot of the trees in David Lamb Park and surrounding are a little bit shorter, right? They're not huge, tall conifer trees. They're little ornamental cherries. And so when you've got a smaller tree, it casts a lot of shade, and you're not going to have as much sun exposure at certain times of the day. And so even though we were placing our traps near turf and on these really great hosts, it did get more shade than we would have liked, some of those ground traps. So the canopy traps, on the other hand, had a lot of sun exposure. But this would require a lot more discussion and even maybe some experiments to figure out maybe if there's anything else going on there. Here's a photo of our survey biologist, Troy Komodo, with a Mr. Longarm extension pole, and he's going to hang a trap in the tree there. And here is the trap with the collection cup right here and the lure hanging on the funnel there, and then a wire hook that we're using to put over top of the branch. So that was canopy traps. A few more slides left here. 2020 versus 2019 results, just some different graphs and visual representations and ways to look at it. I mean, the 2019 results being on your right, you've got time, every 2 to 3 weeks on this bottom x-axis here. So as time goes on, you see the number of beetles being caught goes up and then goes down as flight ends. Very high numbers in 2019, and then you've got 2020 on the left, and the difference is very obvious there, which is great. And yet another representation, if your mind likes this type of chart. You've got the year on the bottom here. The number of traps set is the far right y-axis here, and the solid line is the number of traps. So the number of traps being set is going up. And of course, we do have to set additional traps around the outliers. So that's kind of why. But despite having more traps, we got the peak number of beetles in 2018 and a huge decrease. So if you're interested, I just want to share a little bit about our survey. We are setting traps from June to September. Rather, we're setting them and then they will be in the field during that time. Definitely quite a few traps. We're looking at 2,300, 2,400 for the Lower Mainland. There are also traps in the interior and Vancouver Island. The lure is a combination of the beetle sex pheromone and a floral lure. So it will catch male and female beetles. The trap is a visual cue in itself with the green, and some traps have the yellow. And we will check those traps every 3 weeks, approximately. We target a lot of different sites. It's a grid survey, but we also try to set traps near these types of sites to, try and intercept Japanese beetle where it might be more likely to end up, whether that's an airport, the border points, waste disposal sites, that kind of thing. And we're going to finish up here by talking about the 2021 survey plan. Not a lot is changing. What you're looking at is an entire shot of Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. You've got Vancouver in the very dark blue at the far left. And the different colors just represent different trap densities. So the density is a bit lower the further you go from David Lamb Park. We put traps at highest density where we are most likely to catch the beetle. Given that we all have a finite number of resources and staff and money, we really want to use them most effectively. So that's why this is so complicated, why it has so many colors. So that is our survey results. It's good news overall. We are all really, really happy with that. And of course, there are those of us that think, oh no, will people think, yeah, all done, we're good. No, we're not. So we have to keep going until we get 2 years of negative trap catches. That is the current plan, the current thought. And so we still need your support and your vigilance. If you see adult damage to leaves, larval damage, Maybe not so much larval damage, but really focus on adults. If you see the beetle itself, photos are really welcome, and just give us a call. Our number is there, and I'm sure you'll get a copy of this presentation. Like Fanny said, there's a lot of us involved, and so there's some logos here of the different partners, and I just really appreciate that. And I will stop there and ask if there's any questions.
Great, thank you, Shannon. I think we'll reserve questions for the end and do a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, sure.
Does that work? Okay, excellent.
I will
Thank
stop.
you.
No problem.
So our next speaker we have is Jason Crandall. Jason is a Plant Health Program Officer with CFIA. Jason, it's all yours.
Okay, right on. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, here we go. So, yeah, I'm going to be talking about a bit more of the regulatory aspects of the program and how they might pertain to apply to you or homeowners or just pretty much anybody inside the regulated area. And before I get started here, I think it's important that you know where to find this information for yourself, because we can present it to you and talk all day about it, but when you're at work or in the field or put on the spot, it's probably a good idea to be aware of where this information is if you want to reference it yourself in the future. So this is our Japanese beetle main page here. And I will put the link for this in the chat after the presentation, but it's inspection.gc.ca/JB. And what you're going to find here is a lot of really great information, regulatory stuff. We've got a Q&A, all the stuff that Shannon kind of just went through in terms of pest biology and things like that. We've got that pest fact sheet. And then the survey reports as well, going all the way back to 2018 and beyond. If you want to look at some of that stuff in a bit more detail that Shannon was referencing there, trap catches and numbers, maps, all publicly available. So I think that's really important. Copies of our outreach material here as well. But if you click on this one here, the detection of Japanese beetle, that little link, there's three key features that I really want to point out. The first one is report sightings. We really like it when people report sightings. We really encourage that. So when you click that link, there's a little form. But quite honestly, emailing us directly or calling the Japanese beetle hotline, all good ways to report. And we just really want to, encourage people being enthusiastic about telling us what they're seeing in the field. It's massively important. Even if it's not actually Japanese beetle, that's also really helpful for us because we take that information and we say, okay, what are people seeing? What do they think Japanese beetle looks like? And we kind of build a little list, and with the Invasive Species Council, we've come up with some really good outreach material for lookalikes, basically. So just to kind of help people with the field ID and that kind of thing. So this is important. We've got information available in different languages, and also the guidance document. Everything I'm going to talk about in my presentation from here on out is detailed here and available for you. So don't feel like you have to remember everything I'm saying. it's important, but it's not too difficult to find it. And even then, you can contact us and we can guide you through any part of this. So we're happy to help. So I'm just going to skip right to my first slide here. Okay, so this is the regulated area, and as Shannon was saying, it's really determined by our survey. The survey kind of really tells us with pretty good granularity that the beetles are present primarily within the boundaries of these this shaded area here. Yes, we do get some flyouts every now and then. We really expect that at this point. The Japanese beetle is a notorious hitchhiker. It's a stronger flyer than you probably imagine it is. I've been surprised myself. So flyouts are expected. Stuff outside the regulated area is expected to a limited extent, but primarily it's within here and we want to keep it that way. So to do that, we restrict material that presents a risk for harboring the presence of Japanese beetle life stages. Now, the biggest risk is soil. Soil, year-round life stages potentially present even in the winter. So that's our biggest number one thing that we focus on. But the biggest takeaway here, though, is that like with any kind of quarantine or clean area, lab space, whatever, you want to go from clean to dirty and not the other way around. So movement in, totally fine. Bring all the stuff in you need. And movement within the boundaries, also totally okay. You want to go from the east side of the regulated area to the west side, not a problem. It's movement out that we're really concerned with, because unrestricted movement of at-risk materials outside of this zone is going to present an obstacle to the eradication program and to the control of this insect. So we're really trying to get these regulations out to people like yourself and get them understood. Another thing to point out here is the temporary transfer station. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but Tim's also going to go into that. Really important thing to know. So yeah, I'll move on. So before I explain this table too deeply, I want to tell you what a movement certificate is, because we're going to be talking about that. And I'm going to be referencing that a few times. So a movement certificate is a document that we issue as the regulator that says that you have permission to move a regulated article or potentially infested material from location A to location B for a specific purpose or reason, which is typically disposal. It's a legally binding document, and it has conditions that must be followed that mitigate the risk of that movement and will help prevent beetles leaving the material or the material being disposed of in a way that would allow emergence later on, that kind of thing. So it's a lot less onerous than I'm making it sound. It's very easy to apply for, and there's very few reasons why we wouldn't issue a movement certificate. Like I said, we're here to facilitate and we're here to help. So a movement certificate really just helps us know that that material is being disposed of correctly, and that material is being disposed of in a specific location, so that, you know, if there is emergence later, we do find something outside of the regulated area in a different municipality, we can maybe take a closer look and see if that's tied to a movement or help us understand what's going on. But it's mostly to mitigate risk. So soil always needs a movement certificate. It's regulated year round. Regardless of depth, there is some nuance there, but I'll talk about that. So soil, regardless of depth, year round, regulated material requires a movement certificate. And same thing with plant parts with soil attached. Again, the soil being the key thing here, which is why that's regulated year round, also requires a movement certificate. If you had plant parts without soil, that would be a different story. And so we only regulate above ground plant parts that don't have soil between June 15th and October 15th. June 15th and October 15th is the risk window. That's when adult beetles are flying. That's when those above ground plant parts are at risk of harboring adult beetles. They're feeding, they're crawling, they're flying. So we've got this risk window that's informed by the survey results that tells us that we should be regulating those things. So within that risk window, that material is regulated. Outside of that risk window, after October 16th or before June 14th, those materials are not regulated. They do not require a movement certificate. So really, when in doubt, if there's soil, we would like to issue a movement certificate for that. Without soil, maybe not, depending on the time of year. So there's exemptions because, you know, real life isn't as black and white as yes or no. So the city has been a really great partner in this eradication program, and they've assessed their pathways, and we've you know, looked at that with them. And when plant waste, again, if it's free from soil, if it's disposed of through the municipal green waste program, if you're living inside of the regulated area, that material is okay. That material is going to be handled and disposed of in a way that mitigates the risk, and we know that. If the material is sent through a chipper or a grinder, horizontal grinder, that mitigates the risk of beetles being present in a way that is satisfactory, and that material would be exempt coming out the other end of the machine. Same with, let's say you cut down a tree and you've got all these stumps and sections of wood, branches, but there's no leaves attached and there's no soil associated with that. It's just wood. Exempt. No real risk there. Same with things transiting through. So, you know, stuff that's coming from outside the regulated area on its way to somewhere else. As long as it's not stopping for any, you know, significant amount of time, we're happy with that being okay to move. And dormant bulbs, tubers, corms, rhizomes, things like that. If you had a planter and you dug up all your tulips and you cleaned them off free from soil and you wanted to give them to your grandma in Surrey, perfectly okay to move without a movement certificate. Potted plants that leave or enter and leave during that window of time where the beetles are not flying outside of that risk window, that's okay to move because it's coming in, the soil's clean, it's coming in when there's no beetles, adult beetles present to oviposition inside the pot. And then it's leaving again before the adult beetles emerge. It's okay to move. Same with things that are kept exclusively indoors. So all of anybody's houseplants, they're okay to move as long as they're not set outside, especially during the summer, being put at risk for infestation. They're okay to move. And same with commercially prepared and packaged growing media. If it's manufactured outside of the regulated area, which I would say most of it is, and packaged, as long as the package isn't open, that's okay. Exempt from a movement certificate. So how to obtain this? You're doing work, you're doing a lot of pruning, you've got material you need to move, you've excavated a hole, you've got a bunch of soil. What do? Well, like I said before, we're here to help. Whether or not you actually need a movement certificate, we can help you assess that. We can help you understand the requirements for the material that you have and need to dispose of. But the key piece is to just ask us, to let us know. It's entirely possible that you have some exempt material. We do site assessments as well. That's another avenue that I don't think I have a slide about, but you can apply for a site assessment and say, look, this is what I've got. This is my timeline. These are my needs. Do I have specific disposal requirements? Is deep burial necessary? Do I even need a movement certificate? And we can go through a process that will lay it all bare for you. So I would encourage you to look into that, definitely. Appendix 2 of that guidance document that I showed you at the beginning. If you scroll all the way to the end of the guidance document, Appendix 1 is the application form for a site assessment. Appendix 2 is the application form for a movement certificate. It's not a lot of information. We really just need, timelines, disposal locations, type of material. With a few details, we're pretty good at letting you know what you need to know. That application form also has instructions about who to send it to. There's an email address, which is this guy right here. It's a bit of an alphabet soup, but that's our generic account. And you can send inquiries there. You can send, your suspect photos to that account. You can ask us questions, but that's also where you send the application form for your movement certificate or your site assessment. There's also the hotline. And this is something, it's not monitored all the time in the sense that someone's going to pick up and say hello, but any voicemails are followed up on in a timely manner. And we take that pretty seriously. So I'd encourage you to use either the phone number or the email address, whatever's more convenient for you to get what you need. And again, any certificate that we issue will have a list of conditions. It's typically like you have to take it to the Vancouver landfill and debury it 2 meters, something like that. There's a few more things in terms of transportation. You may need to tarp the conveyance or something like that. But again, we try to make it as clear as possible. And those conditions must be followed because you're moving potentially at-risk material outside of a regulated area. So it's important to read those conditions and understand them. So outside of those exemptions, there are other reasons why you wouldn't need a movement certificate. Just a second. Leaving things on site, huge. Whether you're composting that on site or you're just reburying it, if you've excavated material and you rebury it, or even just storing it. If there's no soil attached, especially if it's just green waste. We've had people do that in the past where if they have the capacity to store this material, they will, and they'll just move it outside of that risk period. Any beetles that might be present, if there's no soil and it's just above ground plant parts, any beetles that might be present, they'll fly out, over the course of the season, looking for mates or looking for greener food. And by the time that risk window is over into the fall, it's pretty safe to move. If, again, I talked about the municipal green bins, not always an option for everybody, but it is an option. And then the temporary transfer station is a real key piece here. It's very centrally located. The city has been kind enough to set aside a space for that and handle that material. I've got an old date here, but Tim's going to talk about the temporary transfer station more, so I'll let him speak to that. But I would encourage you to look into it and find that spot. And if you have quantities of material that fit within their capacity to deal with at that site, by all means, use that site. It's going to really help you out, save you some time, perhaps. So I'm talking a lot about disposal, using a movement certificate to take the material somewhere and dispose of it. What does that mean? Typically, for most things, that means deep burial, especially when we're talking about soil, excavated soil, topsoil. That means deep burial. So if it's too much to go to the temporary transfer station, or it's above ground plant parts with soil attached during the risk period, it's got to go to deep burial. And you'll have to contact the Vancouver landfill and set that up. But that's the condition that your movement certificate would have. There are other options, and we encourage you to explore them. In the appendices of that guidance document, in addition to the application forms, we have schedules for heat treatment and composting. So those are an option for you as well. You would still need a movement certificate to transport the material off-site outside of the regulated area to be composted or heat treated. But that may be a more amenable option for you if you don't want to burial or if it's too costly. You can look into heat treatment or composting. And we're always open to hearing proposals also. We have criteria now to allow deep burial at sites other than the Vancouver landfill. We would have to have those proposals in writing with enough advance notice for us to assess those sites, because we would have to move through that criteria and maybe ask additional follow-up questions. And it could take some time, but it's not off the table by any means. We're open to hearing options that might work better for you and see if we can work with that. So earlier I had said that soil has some nuance to it, and that's what this slide is about here. We make a distinction in risk between the top 30 centimeters and anything below 30 centimeters. And that's associated, that's tied to the life cycle. As the beetle moves through its various larval instars and then pupates, it goes deeper into the soil and then comes back up in the spring to emerge and feed and emerge. And so we've looked at that. How deep do they go? Plus a little extra. 30 centimeters is kind of where we're at. That'll grab any beetles present in the soil for sure. That's the riskiest material that we're really concerned with. That's what's going to require deep burial, definitely in a movement certificate. But if it's deeper than 30 centimeters, or if it's, or if it's under an impermeable surface, like concrete or asphalt, if you've, removed a sidewalk and dug it all up. Or another situation that we've run into is material that's been underwater for an extended period of time. Someone drained a pond and excavated that soil. That's much less risky than exposed 30 centimeters of soil, topsoil. So we don't stipulate a disposal requirement for that material, the stuff under the concrete, deeper than 30 centimeters stuff. It can be disposed of in a way that you would normally dispose of those things. However, we still require a movement certificate. And again, that's simply because we like to track that movement. We like to make sure that that distinction is being made, that risk is being mitigated, and the regulations are such that all soil is regulated. So it's being that it's still a regulated material, it still requires that regulatory paperwork, but the disposal requirement is different, and that's the distinction. So I think I mentioned before, the Vancouver landfill is the only place for deep burial that we have kind of blanket approval for. It's the only kind of quote unquote pre-approved place. But as I said, we do have criteria now for hearing proposals for alternatives. So I talked about that risk period, June 15th to October 15th. And this is really for green waste, stuff that this slide's talking about, stuff that doesn't have soil, no soil associated. So first and foremost, if it's within a quantity that is manageable at the temporary transfer station, explore the temporary transfer station as an option, definitely. If it cannot go to the temporary transfer station, deep burial, heat treatment, composting, same as before. But a reminder again that there are exemptions for chipped or ground green waste. If you essentially treat it in that way on site before it leaves the regulated area, it would not require a movement certificate. So something to maybe keep in mind. So something we run into every now and then is plants that are potted, plants for planting as we call them, that have soil, and they don't want to dispose of them. Whether it could just be a temporary installation, there was an event or something, or, people move. People live inside the regulated area and they move. And that's a situation we've run into many times. Or, maybe there's like this picture here, a hanging basket, and it's just done and you want to take it. There's options for that too, because, we're not going to tell somebody that wants to move to Surrey or New Westminster that they can't take their, prized bonsai Japanese maple with them. So we work with that. And one thing, the most common avenue for movement of these types of things is inspection. So what we would do is we would process the request. talk to the person, understand what we're dealing with, and give them the option for inspection or treatment. And like I said, inspection being the most common avenue. We would need the plant to be removed from the pot if it's in a pot, and the soil removed to the best of their capability, whether that means shaking it free or washing it free. And that's just so that the inspector, when they arrive, can adequately inspect the plant, both above and below ground parts, for life stages of Japanese beetle. If there was still soil attached to the roots, or if it was still in the pot, it would be very, very difficult to ascertain whether certain life stages are present depending on the time of year. So just to facilitate that, we would ask that the plant was depotted and soil removed. But again, then afterwards, if it was repotted with clean soil, like I mentioned before, bagged soil is exempt. You could repot that plant. We issue a movement certificate and you're on your way. The other option is treatment, and there's a little bit more nuance there. It's going to depend on the size of the pot, the size of the root ball, the time of year, where that plant is located, because there's it's a bit more of a process. The province, Trace is going to talk about treatment here, but it is an option. It's just not as an immediate of an option, and it's not always an option. Inspection is really the way to go if you've got a potted plant you need to move, you want to keep. But yeah, I'll mention here, with this and with any of this, movement certificates, site assessments or otherwise, we need to know ahead of time. It's very, very difficult to process these requests and get you what you need the day before it happens. So just be mindful of that. There is a service standard listed on the application form for movement certificates. It's 5 business days. Very, very, very typically, we do it in much less time than that. But it's on-demand work, and things do pick up as the season goes along. So we just want to set some expectations and be mindful of that as well, because we don't want them to back up. We don't want to cause an issue. So yeah, compliance with any regulatory thing, there's always the potential for non-compliance. And we really don't want to beat these regulations into anybody with an iron fist. We like an educational approach. We like to give people the opportunity to regain compliance, to bring themselves and the material and the product into compliance. Because mistakes happen and misunderstandings happen, and there's a lot of information here. We understand that, and things move pretty quickly sometimes as well. So non-compliance is possible. It has happened, it can happen. But it's not an immediate slap on the wrist. It's okay, what can we do? What didn't you understand? How can we help you? We really want to try to be as helpful as possible, because we do understand these regulations impact your business and potentially the procedures and operations that you as a landscaper you might have. And we're sympathetic to that, so we want to work with as much as possible. But really egregious or repeated behavior, that's going to cause us to probably take a closer look. And we do have an operational policy for compliance and enforcement, and we will follow it if we have to. So how can you help? I think the biggest thing is awareness. The stuff that I showed you on our website at the beginning is super important. being mindful of it yourself, talking to other people about it, or talking to us about it, you know, informing your coworkers, your colleagues, your staff members, whoever, just building awareness. And we've got tons and tons of information and materials to help you out with that. We, like I said, we love taking an educational approach. So that's super important. And, you know, yeah, there may be some practices that you may need to adjust to help prevent the spread of Japanese beetle, but, you know, we ask that you, you consider that. The whole eradication program has been extremely collaborative, and it wouldn't be possible if we weren't all working together. So, you know, every little bit helps, even if it's just throwing a tarp over the back of your truck. If that's what you got to do, we supremely appreciate that. Just a little bit more of a recap, really, but leaving things on site, always an option. Being mindful of tools and tarps, even vehicles a little bit to a certain extent. Japanese beetle is a big hitchhiker, can move on things. So, you know, cleaning your equipment and things like that, shaking out your tarps. I talked about site assessments. That's a really helpful thing for us to get involved and guide you through through the work that you may need to do. Yeah, you can always request more information from us. You know, we have this material, like I said, on the website, where we have physical material. We have those cards. I don't know if you guys can see my camera, but they're, you know, we can give you stacks of those cards to hand out to people, or just have in your office. And it's super helpful stuff. Invasive Species Council makes a lot of really, really good material as well. So yeah, whatever we can do to get that information to you, we're happy to do it. And again, I can't stress this enough, hitting up the website, reporting damage, reporting any potential beetles, whether it's the generic email account, the hotline, or the online form on the website. Really important to us. We value that engagement tremendously. So please keep that in mind as well. And yeah, just to reiterate what Shannon was saying, you know, this is a multi-partner thing, a huge response, tremendous effort from everybody here you see on the screen, and people like yourself as well. And the reason that we have seen so much success is because everybody is working collaboratively. So just a big thank you to everybody. And that's it for me. I've got a question slide, but we're leaving that for the end. So presentation over. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jason. That was really thorough. Yeah, that's great. All right, so next we have Tracy, from entomologist with the BC Ministry of Agriculture. Go ahead, Tracy.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my slide here, and can you see me all right? I can't see myself, so.
Yes, we can, and then I think once you share your screen, we won't be able to see you anymore.
Oh, there I am. Okay, good. There, I'm in the center, so that's good. Okay, sharing my screen, hopefully. There we go. Okay. Beginning. There it is.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, first of all, to BCLNA for the invitation to be here tonight. And I know we've done this for a few years in a row now, but I think it's a great way to launch the season and and think about what we need to do to keep this pest out and how we're managing it and what we can all do as part of the program. So there's my contact information in Abbotsford and my email and phone number. So contact me if you have questions. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the treatment program, how we made the decisions about what to treat and so on, an application update, a little bit about the costs and how to get more information. So you've seen this slide 2 times before, so you get to see it again. We have 3 levels of government involved in this, plus industry and non-government organizations. So it's been a real team effort, and nobody could do this alone. And so we felt the best way was to work together. And everybody in the audience here today is part of this team. So our goal remains the same: eradication of Japanese beetle from British Columbia. And our feeling is that more effort now will hopefully prevent establishment and spread and any future ongoing control efforts, which will end up being more expensive. So our results so far have been excellent, as Shannon talked about. The eradication program relies on the survey data to tell us how we're doing. And in the first year of treatment, we had an 86% drop in beetles. And in the next year of treatment, we had an 82% drop in beetles. And so now we have to wait till 2021 before we'll know how good we did in 2020. But so far, it looks like our treatments are working, which is excellent. And we've only still got the one hotspot at Falls Creek. So this indicates that the movement control practices that Jason shared with us is working also. So this is the completed treatment areas for 2020. And so what you can see is Falls Creek, and the gray areas are all buildings and hardscape, and then the green is treated areas, the two different kinds of greens. So quite a lot got treated all the way around, and we're pretty happy with that result of coverage. So in summary, about 48 hectares of public land was treated. That included 31 parks plus City Hall campus, lots of medians and boulevards, and other city lands like engineering lands and so on. In addition, private lands were treated in this zone, and we relied heavily on the commercial applicators who reached out to the landowners and the strata managers, and they received almost 100% support to treat. And that was about 10 hectares in total. And many sites have been treated 3 times now over the years. And I just want to point out, there's like only the odd red spot, and that indicates where we didn't have permission. So I can only see one right now in this picture. And just to note that the treatment area for 2020 was inside this red line here. So just around Falls Creek, and then a couple spots up here. Anyways, that's kind of what it looks like. So our plan for 2021, the epicenter continues to be David Lamb Park, and the treatment area continues to be about 200-meter radius around every positive trap. Our target life stage is young larvae as well as the adult beetles in some areas. And we've added an enhanced treatment area, which is new for 2021, and I'll share a bit about that. So the 2021 rollout, first thing that happens is a notice to treat issued to the City of Vancouver in March from the province. There's a news release, and then treatments begin. And here's just a screenshot of what the notice to treat would look like, addressed to the city directors. And there's David Lamb Park, just a screenshot of it's a nice green, looks like a nice big green pasture, and so beetles love it. And you can see there's lots of park area, of course, around that zone as well, and that's where we found the most beetles so far. So this is the new treatment area for 2021. And if you remember the red line I showed you earlier, this is a blue line now, outline in our 2021 treatment area. You can see it's smaller, it's covering a smaller area. All this west stuff is mostly gone. So that is excellent. We're making progress. We just got these few spots out here. We just thought it would be worth doing another year of treatment out here. And but the most of it is right around Falls Creek. And there's David Lamb Park where the star is. So this is the enhanced treatment area that I mentioned, and there's David Lamb Park right there. And what we've decided to do this year is enhanced treatment of this area, which means including all landscape beds, upper level turf, any upper level landscape, in addition to the ground level turf, which is what we've been treating for the last 3 years. So we really want to get after this area because that's where we're finding the most beetles. So the main tool we use for treatment of larvae is acelepryn. It's a liquid formulation, and it's the same product we've used for the last 3 years. It's applied one time to the ground between April 1st and July 15th. The treatments have gone well so far. The city parks and a few private lands have already been done. So we're progressing well. The weather's been very cooperative. I don't think they've had any wind days, like at all. I think it's gone really according to schedule. So the target is the larva, as you can see in this image. Another thing we've added new for 2021 is just to try the acelepryn G. And it's a granular formulation and applied by broadcast. So different application method than the other formulation. And we thought this might be handy for small or challenging locations, landscape beds, or upper level landscapes in the enhanced treatment area. So the two main landscapers have some of this now, and they'll give it a try. So it should have the same effect. It's just a different formulation, so it's different to handle. Just a little bit about acelepryn. It is a group 28 insecticide, which is relatively new. It's a reduced risk or low toxicity product, so it is really safe on non-target organisms like birds, honeybees, mammals, and fish. The turf pests on the label are, there's quite a few, including Japanese beetle, European chafer, cutworm, and so on. And it has a really high level of efficacy on beetle larvae in the soil at really, really low rates. And if you look down at this little table at the bottom, grams of active ingredient per 100 meters, 1.12 grams, 1 to 1.176 grams. That's not very much at all. And the toxicity is really low. So that's a great fit for where we're using it. This is a slide from Syngenta, the manufacturer, that just talks about some of the impacts or that they've looked at, and they're saying that it's, sorry about the phone. The plants are, negligible risk to plants, earthworms, other soil microbiota, safe for fish, but it does have toxicity to invertebrates that live in the water. And so, of course, there's a buffer that's got to be minded and followed when you're applying near water. So that's an important point. This is just another discussion of a trial where they looked at they compared different types of soil insecticides, and acelepryn was a really good fit in mixed and urban environments because it does have a low impact on beneficials compared to its competitors. So that was good news. Another Syngenta slide. Okay, so sites to be treated with acelepryn. In general, turf around 1 meter by meter, solid turf with no gaps, yes, treat. So boulevards, parks, even planter boxes. And this is, if you're thinking about the enhanced treatment area, treat the tree and the planter boxes. So don't skip those, whereas maybe in the past years they got skipped. Fence lines, even small patches like this, we're treating in the enhanced treatment area. And this is a crushed gravel kind of waste area. It's not probably good egg laying site for Japanese beetle, but in the treatment, in the enhanced treatment area, we're saying treat it just in case. Planter boxes with ornamental grasses, yes, treat, especially in the enhanced area. In planter boxes with no ornamental grasses, they don't need to be treated unless they're in the enhanced treatment area. So just a little bit of kind of a uptick on what we want treated in 2021. So another thing, this is, I think, going to be really helpful. CFIA has flagged the positive sites already this spring so that when the applicators are out there and they see this yellow flagging tape, they'll know that that's a positive catch site. So the trap would have been in the tree, for example, last year, and they'll know that they need to treat the shrubs and the ground and that all around that tree. And so 5 to 10 meters around a tree with a celloprint, and if there was turf out there, they would treat that too. Just to just help the applicators, and I think the flagging tape is a nice addition. So we are doing foliar treatment for adult beetles, and we've done this for a couple seasons now. We're using a new product called Beetle Gone, or Bacillus thuringiensis galleria. So I'm sure you're all familiar with BTK. This is BTG, and it works for beetles, works on beetles. It must be consumed by the feeding beetles. So we're using this as a foliar treatment during beetle flight. So in June and July, every 10 days or so in the areas where feeding damage has been noticed. So that's around David Lamb Park, Marina Side, sort of over there in the enhanced area. Even though this is a microbial insecticide, the applicators are still required to be licensed and sign the areas to be treated as they would for a celloprint. So there's no skimping out on signage or notifications just because it's a microbial. So here's the enhanced area again. And so where we've treated in the past have been some of the trees around David Lamb. And this year we want to do more like up here, down these streets, and get some more coverage even down this way towards George Wayneburn Park. So in 2020, there was no feeding damage reported, which is excellent. This picture is from 2017 or 2018, sorry. So what we do ask is that all the landscapers and applicators and folks out there working in the landscape keep an eye out for any beetles or suspect feeding damage. Of course, other insects can feed on leaves, but Shannon showed lots of great pictures of extensive damage, and this is not hugely extensive, but it does kind of show the laciness of the feeding, characteristic feeding. So this is the city's schedule, and it's posted on their website, and here's the link up here. I think they've done a really great job of trying to keep people updated about what's going on, and they started at the beginning of April, and they're pretty much done. Their last date was April 21st, and now they're on to the engineering lands and so on. And so I encourage you to check out the city's webpage. They've got some information on there. Notification signs. This is important, and we felt it's been really important from a communications perspective with the public. And so if you're doing applications, or if your colleagues are doing applications, or don't skimp out, these have been really helpful for us. So here's a regular pesticide use sign, but we've got these info signs that are useful as well. And here's some city signs that I'm sure you've seen around. Now the city does tape off some areas when it treats, but it doesn't always. And it doesn't close the parks, but staff helps move people around a bit and redirect the walkers so that they aren't in the way of the sprayers. So I think that's worked quite well. Here's a shot of David Land Park with the golf course sprayer, and you can see how regularly the signs are placed just to try to keep people off the grass, and it's been working. Another shot of David Land Park with the truck sprayer, and again signs, 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 and the people look like they're staying on the path, so that's good. So the verification process and reporting. We start out with the spring operators meeting in the beginning of April. The main applicator companies that we've been working with are Bartlett Tree Experts and Paris-Based Landscaping. So great thank you out to them for collaborating with us on this project. And they also, yeah, they've just been involved right from the beginning. So it's been good to work with the same teams. When they do a treatment, or when somebody does a treatment, I will say that there are sometimes other applicators, and that is perfectly fine. I welcome everybody to be part of this if they want to. It's just that these two have been the main ones, so I wanted to recognize them. So reporting, Ministry of Environment requires that you keep track of the pesticides you use, and we're using it also for tracking our program. And this includes information about area treated, date and time, where you were, any kind of challenges or weather issues, and then it all gets, we map it, and it enables us to keep track of what's going on, how much chemicals used, and all that. So we use this ArcGIS collector app, which allows the applicators to do real-time data input when they're out in the field. And they can also finish it and update it when they're back in the office. And here's just an example of a polygon and the information that's associated with it. And we're finding this to be quite a useful tool. Here's the form for Ministry of Environment. It's available at this link if you want to check it out. But that's one tool we use for tracking. So costs for treatment. For the treatment of turf and landscape with the celloprene within the treatment area, the Ministry of Agriculture covers those costs. So within the blue lines, we cover that. So if you have clients with turf in this area, or non-turf but landscape in the enhanced area, we'll reimburse the cost of application and product. So the landscaper needs to seek the permission to treat from the owner or manager, and then gets the work done, arranges for all that, and then the Ministry of Ag gets invoiced for the work needed. So if you want some more details or want to talk about how it might work for you, contact me and we can have a discussion. One tool that might be helpful with this is the letter to landowners asking for permission to treat, and just a bit of awareness about the program. So this would have come in the BC Landscape and Nursery Spring Package. If you need it, you can ask Fanny or ask me. So this is the CFIA's regulated area, which you've seen earlier. If there are people who want treatments, but they're in this area, but they're not actually in the treatment area, which is this little subset. It's not shown on here, but it's a subset of within this area. If they're somewhere out here and they want to get treated, they can get treated with a celloprene to prevent Japanese beetle, but it's at the client's cost. So the city bylaws allow for that in this program. So what's the plan for the upcoming years? Well, trapping results in 2020 will determine the size and location of treatment for 2022. If our numbers continue to shrink by 80+% a year, then we won't have that many to treat next year. I'm crossing my fingers. We want to get to 2 years of no beetles. Well, that'll be considered eradicated. And of course, CFIA's annual surveys will continue as long as Japanese beetle is regulated. And this enables us to keep watch even after the eradication is complete. So we'll always have that monitoring tool as long as the regulation is in place. So here's our website. with some Japanese beetle information and the short link, the quick link. But even if you Google Japanese beetle in British Columbia, you'll come up with any one of these sites, whether it's CFIA or the ministry or the city or Invasive Species Council. They've all got great resources. And if you need any handouts or want any PDFs of any of this stuff, you can get that either from any of our partners or from BCLNA. So, and here's my contact information if you have any questions. All right, Fanny, that's all I've got. I'm going to stop sharing.
Great, thank you, Tracy. That was excellent. Next we have Tim. I have a couple of slides for Tim that I'm going to put up here. Just get myself sorted. Tim's with the City of Vancouver, and we'll be talking about the temporary transfer station. Let me get myself organized here. Oh. All right, Tim, it's all yours.
All right, can everybody hear me? Okay,
Yes.
Evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Tim McMillan. I'm the operations manager for the collections work group of the City of Vancouver Sanitation Department. So basically, I run our operations for our garbage and green bin composting program with the city within the regulated area and throughout the entire city. So we also have been asked to provide the temporary transfer station to help eradicate the Japanese beetle. So again, thanks for joining us. If you're here this evening, that means that you are serious participant in working collaboratively with the group to try to eradicate Japanese beetle and avoid the impact to both the industry that you are taking part of, agriculture, and other damages, both physically and financial, that would happen throughout the region. So like I mentioned, we operating the temporary transfer station, which is located at 301 West 1st Avenue. It's in the same location as the last previous years. The entrance is off of Wiley Street, and we would exit out of Crow. There's a picture. Thanks, Fanny. There's a picture on the left of where the transfer station is located, and then what the entrance is there. So as we know, the flight season for the Japanese beetle is from June 15th to October 15th. We wanted to keep it quite simple for the industry. We're going to be opening up on Monday, June 14th, and we'll be working straight through Monday to Friday from 2 to 6 a.m., excluding statutory holidays. We'll be open there on to be able to service and take your waste that you're bringing from the regulated area, and to help you drop that off before you have to leave the area to go back either to your home base or to other jobs that are outside the regulated area. So the fees, we've remained the same throughout the campaign. We're going to be doing that exactly the same thing this year too, try to keep it simple. So basically a small wheelbarrow. I haven't seen anybody show up with a wheelbarrow, but a very small amount of material is $15. If you come with a small amount in your pickup truck, which is usually generally what we see, half a pickup truck, $25. And if you're bringing a heaping load or a full pickup truck, sorry, 50. And if you had a heaping load, that would be 75. So what we've typically seen in the past is a lot of landscaping companies in industry will consolidate their waste into one truck that allows the other crews to take off early or to carry on with other work throughout the region. And one crew will come to the transfer station and dispose of that. So part of the cost associated with that is that we are required to haul that waste to the incinerator in Burnaby and dispose of it that way. So as mentioned earlier this evening, there's two ways to get rid of material from inside the regulated area, and that's through deep burial. which I'll talk about in a little bit, but also the green waste that you would find and most of you would be bringing to the transfer site would be taken to the incinerator. And that way we're ensuring that no beetle can escape or get out, and it'll be destroyed in the incineration process. The one thing that was last year that came about due to COVID is that we changed our payment system that we were taking, and we went to just a direct pay system with MasterCard, debit, and Visa. So as always, there's been no cash exchanged on site just for security reasons. I'm happy to report that this year we're very, very close to returning back to the invoicing system that we had in the past. So I can't say that we're 100% there and guarantee that it's happening, but my prediction would be that we will be able to return to the system that we had in the previous years, where customers would be able to attend the transfer station site and we would record your information and then invoice you at the end of the month. So more to follow, and we'll be messaging that, but my prediction is that we'll be successful. As you know, if you were in this for the long haul last year, a lot of you are required to get Visa cards for your company, and that was a bit of a challenge, but it did seem to work out overall. Next slide, please. I guess the other thing that I would say, and just keep in mind, is we are going to be working diligently to make sure that it's very efficient for customers at the transfer station. The hours are over time been limited to 2 to 6 o'clock to try to catch the predominance of when the customers come. The one thing that we've done last year is we got a bobcat in to help expedite the dumping process, so customers could come in quickly, get through the weighmaster, register or pay, and then they could unload their material very quickly. So the bobcat will be there basically from the very opening day to help expedite and get customers in quickly and out the door. Just we talked about earlier too about the regulated area. So part of my duties here is not just to run the transfer station, but we're also collecting the green waste that's within the regulated area. So there is commercial customers that will be taking their material to the temporary transfer station where we are, but there is also residents that are getting their waste picked up by what we consider our general garbage trucks. And just out of an abundance of caution, that material as well is going to be run out to the incinerator. So just everybody working in collaboration to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep the Japanese beetle at bay, and through treatment keep reducing it till we get eradication. I think that's really for me. The one thing that was mentioned as well, so we take predominantly green material. You do have the ability to take a very limited amount of soil. Limited amount of soil would be basically a root ball or a small amount. We encourage everybody to do everything that they can to shake your green material and remove all the soil and leave it in place on your job site if you can. Removing that soil is quite costly, and there's a whole process to go to landfill. So it was mentioned before about if you do require to do deep burial, the one location it's a city facility out at the landfill. They will require a minimum of 24 hours notice if you plan to take your material out there. I would recommend that you leave at least 48 hours if you do choose and you've got no other options than to move your soil material off-site and you need to go for deep burial. We would encourage, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you can, leave it on site, and if at all possible, just do not remove that material. But if you're forced to do that, we can take a very small amount, like root balls, if you're replacing dead trees or whatever, very small amount, but anything other than that, you'd be required to take it to the landfill. I think that's it for me, actually. So thank you, pretty short and sweet. Again, we'll be opening up on June 14th between 2 and 4, ready to receive our first customers there. If you have any questions that relate to the transfer station, you're free to call 311 and they can connect you with myself, or you go to the vancouver.ca website and all the information, not just included for the temporary transfer station, but lots of material about Japanese beetle as well. So I thank you for your time and everyone's effort to eradicate Japanese beetle, and I look forward to another successful year. And thank you for your cooperation.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. That was great, and good news about the potential for invoicing returning. We're happy to hear that. So please keep us posted on that once you know.
It certainly will. I would, really we're about 95% of the way there. I'm totally 99% confident that we'll definitely get there. We recognize that that makes it simpler and easier for the customer. And what we've learned, as we all know, as we've gone through COVID here, and we look at the exchange of papers and documents and stuff like that over the year, that we're probably okay doing that. So we're moving towards that, and I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to provide that service this year.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you. So that wraps up our presentations for the evening. We're going to go to a Q&A now. I have been taking note of some of the questions that have been coming in, and thank you, Shannon, for commenting on the question about the enforcement from the CFIA. Everybody should be able to view any questions that are answered. So if you go into your Q&A, you can see Shannon's response there about following up on anyone who's been reported for soil movement or violating the guidelines. One of the questions that came in early on, and I think this would be for Shannon as well, is do we have a known impact of the Japanese beetle traps on other beetles or insects?
Yeah, great question. So from my own observations of our work doing this survey, we did have a couple cases one year of finding honeybees in the trap. And what happened, we think, is that they were put in an agriculture area before the beehives were put out, and then after the beehives came in. And as soon as the inspectors noticed that, they moved the traps away. We also have moved away from the yellow funnels and gone to green funnels, because yellow attracts the honeybees more, whereas green does not, is my understanding. Other than that, we have found a lot of chafer in the traps. I don't know that, it's probably the floral lure. It wouldn't be the sex pheromone. And I don't know, Jason, if I've missed anything that we do find in those traps.
I would say that outside of honeybees, chafer is probably the number one thing that we pop up in these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And then there was just one comment about, I guess, to Tim at the city. Any comments on the sanitation practices at the temporary transfer station in terms of terminals and sanitizing touch points? I assume that'll all be in effect again this year.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So yeah, we will have, I guess, the first facilities to use the washroom, which should be sanitized, and hand cleaner there. We will have hand cleaners available for people that would require it. But yes, the waymasters will be using the same COVID protocols to keep themselves and the public safe. Staff will be wearing their masks when they're around the public. I mean, we would ask, just with the public health orders, that we try to keep our spacing, and that can be a challenge if you're right up and against the bin, whichever like that. That's why we'd be wearing masks and asking that people do their best to keep their distance, but if not, you're wearing your mask. Terminals would be cleaned and sprayed and wiped down in between each use. So we'll make sure that we're doing everything to not just keep ourselves safe, but the public safe as well. So if you have any concerns about that, then we have a supervisor on site And please bring anything up that you're maybe concerned about, or if you have any questions, they're on site to not just help you get in and out there, but if you have some concerns around that, just let us know.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions out there? I think we've covered most of it. I know somebody had a question earlier about soil being removed from construction sites, or demolitions, but I believe Jason answered all of that. But if there's any further questions to that point, you're welcome to raise that. I'll just leave it open here for a second. I know sometimes it takes people a minute to type and get their words out there, get them formulated. We had some very thorough presentations this evening, so you may have answered everyone's questions.
Everyone wants to go watch TV or have dinner.
Yeah, it could be. So yeah, I guess if there are no more questions out there, then we will wrap this up. I would like to thank our speakers this evening for taking the time to inform and educate us all and let us know, keep us informed on the status of the program and what we need to know for another successful year. And thank you to everyone that attended this evening's session. Please connect with us if you have any further questions. You did all receive an email from me earlier this afternoon. I put my email address in the chat as well, so you're welcome if you come up with a question afterwards to send it my way, and I will connect you or get your question to the right presenter or person or agency. And we are recording this as well, so this will be posted on our website, and if you'd like a copy of the recording, let me know. It'll be up on our YouTube channel as well. Great, excellent. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll have a great evening. It's great to see you.
Very much.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.